talking horses, cattle, sheep, ducks.
Are you planning to live in or travel around either Costa Rica or Nicaragua and you plan to drive your own transport? What are the main things that you should know before coming out here to be on these roads?
A very common thing is to go through police checkpoints.
Today I give you the 4 main differences and 4 things that you should know before coming out to this region of the world.
You're really learning how people do actually drive because it's quite different.
Enjoy.
We're using the Insta360 camera. Hey there, and welcome back to Generic Expats. Today we find ourselves in Costa Rica in the northern suburbs called San Isidro de Heredia. This is where I've been staying for the past 5 weeks. This is my final week in Costa Rica. And today we're going to be comparing and contrasting driving in both Costa Rica with Nicaragua. I spent 6 weeks in Nicaragua before I came here to Costa Rica. And now I'm completing my 6th week next week here in Costa Rica. There are 4 main things that you need to look out for, you need to know about before coming to these countries. And before I start that conversation, that idea, I want to mention that if you are coming to this country, this region of the world, and you haven't driven these types of road conditions and this different driving style, I definitely suggest taking it very slowly, right? Going very slow for your first day, really learning how people do actually drive, because it's quite different. If you're coming from the US, from Canada, and you're coming on vacation in Costa Rica, if you're driving through Nicaragua on vacation as well, if you want to rent a car or you have some type of way to experience the country that way, definitely take it slow on your first day or so. So, getting into it, guys. Number 1 is going to be the streets, the roads. Road conditions in Nicaragua surprisingly win this one here. They win the cake on this competition because they actually have what I consider to be far superior roads overall compared to what I've driven here in Costa Rica. Costa Rica actually does have quite good roads. I've been driving a bit more after my mom and sister left. They came down to visit me, and yes, that is one of the times where I saw some of the worst roads I've actually seen in all of Latin America. And that being said, driving around the Monteverde area, which is one of the biggest tourism spots, I was super surprised to see that they didn't have the quality of roads that you would expect from a country that depends 100% on tourism for their economy. Now, road conditions in Nicaragua are surprisingly good. I drove all the way up to near the Honduras border in the north to visit Elton over there to do some of my work for Generic Expats, and let me just say that was a surprising experience. Super good roads, even to like very remote areas, whereas in Costa Rica, I mean, an area that was supposedly one of the biggest tourism hotspots in the country didn't actually have good roads at all. They were some of the worst I've ever seen. So Costa Rica does have good roads in general. You just have to know that the roads you're seeing right now are not the typical roads all around the country. As you probably saw before, those type of roads with no shoulder, very narrow at the area I just passed, are very, very common, and not having type of shoulders like you see now with the cars parked on an area that doesn't interrupt your driving it's pretty common to see that type of thing happening. So you have to be aware of that and know how to drive around it, or to stop and let people pass. That's just a simple thing that will help you drive safer and do things better on your trip or your lifestyle here if you're living here. So road conditions are one thing to definitely know about, especially if you're planning to be around the Monteverde area. That is not going to be good for people that are doing their first driving experience outside of the US or Canada. I would say maybe that's something that you should avoid and maybe plan it for a different time. It is pretty pretty stressful. I have been driving the streets of Latin American countries for more than 2 years, mostly on my motorcycle, pretty much all on my motorcycle, and yeah, that was a very stressful situation. Roads were just not satisfactory. They were not acceptable. So that is going to be topic number 1 of what you should know and what you should be aware of if you're planning to drive around and live in Costa Rica or Nicaragua. Number 2 is going to be police. Now, we actually had a police drive past us as we were coming here, and the police here, transit police or national police, there isn't a military in this country. Therefore, it's actually pretty uncommon to see police around Costa Rica. In my 5 weeks and 5.5, almost 6 weeks I've been here, most of them I've seen in downtown San Jose. And downtown San Jose is where most of the safety issues, the crime, the poverty is actually quite an issue. And I hope that will be resolved at some point. But that's actually one of the main reasons why people think that being in Costa Rica in 2024 is more dangerous than being in Nicaragua in 2024. I just interviewed a person that lives in both countries and is from one and lives in the other, and he says yes, that definitely is my view of the situation. So the police in Costa Rica are not so prevalent, therefore you don't have to worry so much about them stopping you constantly, whereas in Nicaragua you do, right? That is something that is a very common thing, is to go through police checkpoints. Now, it's kind of a very strange difference from the US and maybe Canadian mentality of, okay, well, the police stop me, they're going to try and, ask me if I've done things wrong and try and, convince me or trick me into confessing into doing illegal things. And usually they stop you, or supposed to stop you, with an actual claim to you doing something wrong. In Nicaragua, there are many police checks, and they are not for this exact reason. They don't stop you and say, oh, by the way, I saw you do this, I saw you do that. This is the fine if I have to give you the ticket. No, I've been stopped while I was living in Nicaragua, I think 5-6 times from the police stops. The police checks are everywhere, and they just randomly stop people and they just ask you, how you doing? How's it going? There is a pretty common thing in Latin America that happens with police, is that they occasionally ask for bribes or ask you for some extra money, and they do it in very different ways in every country, so it's not always the same. But in Nicaragua, I remember I was stopped one time, and they were very friendly. Oh, how's it going? Oh, you're doing a trip? Oh, you're traveling out to go do some video content for your channel? Oh, that's quite interesting. Oh, yeah, we haven't eaten yet. And I said, oh, really? You haven't eaten? And they're like, yeah, I'm pretty hungry. Haven't had time to stop and eat. We've been working just all day long. It's been a long day, and I didn't take the hint. I really had no idea what they wanted, but supposedly from that conversation, I talked to others that live in Nicaragua. They said, oh yeah, they wanted maybe a little bit of cash. They were hinting at you giving cash so that they could buy some lunch. I was like, well, that was a really strange way to put it. I mean, I actually had lunch in my central compartment. My Honda NC700X has a central compartment where I can put stuff when I'm doing trips and traveling around, and it's really convenient. And I had a lunch there because I was out to go make some content, but I wanted to eat something good from my favorite restaurant, so I brought it. And I thought maybe he wanted the lunch I had in my bike. And yeah, guys, speaking of driving and speaking of motorcycles here in Latin America, on my channel, what my goal is to do is I plan and will be living in every Latin American countries, specifically the Spanish and Portuguese speaking ones, for a minimum of 6 weeks in order to understand the basics of how it is to live in each one of these countries and to give my perspective and document my experience and give you my own details of what I think you should know about these countries. If you're planning to retire or move abroad or be a digital nomad like me, I mean, it's interesting information, and I try and do everything in a very interesting and fun, entertaining way. And so yeah, that is my Generic Expats channel. Please, if you're enjoying the content, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and also if you're interested and you want to help support my channel and give me things like what I'm recording this episode on today, I actually just made some investments into the Generic Expats channel, and I upgraded with some of my equipment here. We're using the Insta360 camera that I'm using for this drive, and the new microphone setup. I have another microphone that's going into my helmet, and there's a lot more things I need to do in order to continue improving. But yeah, go ahead and hit me a donation on PayPal or buy me a copy. That would be very, very much appreciated, guys. So yeah, that is number 2 now. Number 2 is police stops. They are very rare in Costa Rica. I've only been driven through one, and that was on my motorcycle driving into San Jose, whereas on my entire trip with my mom and sister, didn't see one. It was very, very surprising, to be honest. And so that is number 2, police stops. Now, number 3 is going to be road hazards, and in particular, they're quite different between the two countries, so we'll have to take them one by one. Nicaragua has a very interesting road hazard situation where they actually have a ton of farm animals everywhere on the sides of the roads. They are practically everywhere. And we're talking horses, cattle, sheep, ducks, pigs, every possible farm animal you can think of. They are just sometimes on the roads, sometimes crossing, sometimes they're everywhere. And it's super endearing sometimes if you're on vacation and you're just taking it easy. You're not trying to get super fast to point A, from point A to point B. But yeah, it can be a bit of a nuisance. It can be a bit of a nuisance is the word. If you have to, wait for a big group of sheep or cows to cross a road when you're trying to get something done. It's really unique, and it's part of the Nicaragua experience, but it's also something to keep in mind. And also, that's why driving slowly in that country is always a good idea. So that is specifically Nicaraguan. Whereas if you go to Costa Rica, driving in this country has almost no farm animals, and that was like a massive, drastic change for me. I was not expecting that. I didn't see any, and I have been here, like I said, almost 6 weeks, and I haven't seen almost any farm animals at all. So that's a cultural change, that's a policy change. And what you do have in Costa Rica is it's the same in Nicaragua, but you have the flora and fauna crossings, right? The crossings where you are going to be careful for the types of animals that are, part of the protected species, the type of animals that helps feed their tourism and that type of thing in their economy. Obviously, they're going to make sure they try to protect them as best as possible by not cutting down trees and forests, and also not having people just run into them and kill them on the roads as well. So that is one other part that is the Costa Rican lifestyle here. Is there are some crossings of animals sometimes, but it's not super frequent. You won't see like monkeys running across the street in big gangs, or I don't think I've only seen, some dead animals here and there, but it's pretty infrequent, so I wouldn't say it's actually a deal at all. The farm animals in Nicaragua, that actually is a daily thing, and it's something to definitely be aware of. Whereas the Costa Rican side of things, it's more the hazards for the larger towns and cities, where people in Latin America are a bit more flexible with their way of walking around on streets, and not like there aren't really crosswalks for people to use. A lot of the times there aren't sidewalks, there aren't the typical things we'd have back in the US and Canada. Therefore, you have to be aware of them crossing the street, and they typically just go, they will generally make eye contact with you, which is great, a great thing to know if you're going to be using these streets. You have to make sure to make eye contact with people as much as possible, because that's what confirms that you're going to be doing something, and that the people around you know that you're going to do it, and you're going to do it at a certain point, and that's what's going to happen. So that is number 3 on comparing Nicaragua and Costa Rica driving styles. Now number 4 is going to be the speeds of the local drivers. Now the drivers in Nicaragua are quite a bit more exaggerated in terms of numbers of people that do it and how much they do it by. So they actually are very, very slow drivers in Nicaragua, and a lot of them are. So it's not just a couple here and there like in Costa Rica. Costa Rica has some drivers here and there that do go a little slower, and yeah, maybe like 20. If it's a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, sometimes there's someone going 30. A lot of times it's the trucks, the heavy the commercial trucks that are transporting things. They occasionally, especially going up and down mountains, or up mountains specifically, they're going to go maybe 20 miles an hour, 15 sometimes when the speed limit's 50 or 40 or whatever. So keep that in mind, that does happen. But people in Nicaragua are very, very accustomed to a large percentage of them actually driving very slowly. It's not just a few, it's a large percentage of them. So when people are, I'm just going to do a little Yui here, just do a little bit extra route for you so I can show you my story. We are on an underpass right here. I'm just about to get to my gym where I'm going to be exercising at my local Brazilian fitness center. It's called Smart Fit. It's my favorite gym in Latin America. I go there in every city I live in, and I absolutely love it. It's perfect for me. Anyways, that type of acceptance and normality of driving slowly, really slowly, like half the speed, if it's 60 miles an hour, let's say, sometimes there's a couple people that drive 20, and there's no like minimum speed, at least enforced, so people do it so normally it can be pretty dangerous if you're used to driving quickly. I'm kind of a fast driver. I'm driving slowly for this video because this is the first time I've ever done a comparison video while doing my drive to the gym and using my action camera. So that's number 4 of my things to keep in mind while you're driving and living in or driving around Costa Rica and Nicaragua. There are people that decide to go way above the speed limit in both countries, and then there's a big percentage of them that decide to go way below it in Nicaragua. Not so much in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica there are some, but it's pretty insignificant, whereas it's insignificant in Costa Rica, where it's pretty big in Nicaragua. Looks like we have an accident right here. Here's another thing I didn't include in the comparison video because it's not really something that changes between the countries. In Latin America, in general, they have a system of insurance where if you have any sort of accident with another driver, you need to stop immediately where you are, and without stopping in the exact location and waiting for the police to come, your insurance claim is void. So that is something to keep in mind as well if you're planning to be around these areas, because that is something that really makes driving around here complicated. It makes huge lines and big disturbances if you're on highways and whatnot. I was driving to La Fortuna the other day, and there was an accident, a fatal accident. It was very sad, a very serious looking one, and I had to do a 2-hour detour around it because it literally caused a huge disturbance to me. I wasn't prepared for it, and it was definitely something I was not happy about, but you know, I turned my 3-hour drive to a 5-hour drive. That's life. All right, guys, well, if you're enjoying my content, like I mentioned, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and hasta la próxima.